So hi everyone, and welcome to today's session. We're going to talk about how to get your company CWB certified. My name is Mo Zayani. I'm the business manager of CWB Consulting. I'm glad you could all join us today. Before we get started, I just want to share a quick note with you. The slides that Remy will be going over today and the recording of the session will be shared with you by email in the coming days. So no need to worry about taking screenshots or detailed notes. You'll be able to revisit everything afterwards. If you have anyone within your company or your organization that would be interested in these slides, feel free to forward the slides to them along with the recording. In terms of agenda, we'll spend about 30 minutes walking through the key steps to achieving certification, followed by a Q&A session in the second half. So you're welcome to start submitting your questions using the Teams chat, or you can ask them live during the Q&A portion. So you should have the ability to unmute yourself at the end. So just make sure to have a working microphone, and then the second half an hour we can have a more interactive portion with questions and answers. Now let's take a moment to talk about why CWB certification matters. Becoming certified is obviously an important milestone for any company. It demonstrates a clear commitment to quality, safety, and compliance with recognized Canadian standards. It also sends a strong message to your clients and partners. It could also open the door to new markets and opportunity. With that said, many companies quickly realize that achieving and maintaining the certification is a journey. Could be time-consuming, resource intensive, and it's definitely not a one-time effort. It requires ongoing attention and continuous improvement. In many cases, managing the certification becomes an added responsibility on top of an already busy workload, whether you're meeting production deadlines, supervising teams and welders, or supporting clients. On top of that, if we add interpreting CSA standards, completing the documentation and forms, and preparing for audits, could feel overwhelming. The good news is you don't have to do it alone. There are resources and experts available, including within the CWB group, to help you guide you through the process and clarify the requirements. During today's session, we'll go over the steps from completing the forms to qualifying the supervisors and engineers, developing and submitting your welding procedures, and ensuring your welders are properly qualified. By the end of this webinar, you should have a clear understanding of what's involved, what to expect, and where to find support along the way. With that, let's get started. I'll now hand it over to Remy Lupien, who will take us through the first part of today's presentation.
Thank you, Mo, for the introduction. So hello, everyone. I'm Remy Lupien, and I've been working for the CWB for 4 years, and I'll be your host for today's webinar. So let's get started. All right. Like Mo said, a quick note before we dive in, everything we're showing today, including all the forms and guides, will be emailed to you within the next few days. So don't worry about taking notes or copying anything down. All right. There are 6 important steps to achieving certification. Now let's start with step 1, complete the forms. Your first job is to complete the forms. Once you've submitted the 150 form, that's your application for certification, you'll be assigned a Certification Service Representative, or CSR for short. Your CSR is essentially your main point of contact with CWB. This is the person you'll reach out to when you need to schedule welder testing or procedure qualifications. And this is also the person who will audit you later on. We'll go deeper into welder testing and procedure a little later in the session. After the 150 form, there are a few additional forms you'll need to submit. The form 151 is your list of personnel and their contact information. Form 155 is your welding supervisor's resume. The form 159 is usually completed by your full-time or retained engineer. So step 1 is really about getting all this information in place so we can set up your certification properly. Is all about qualifying your welding supervisor. And honestly, this is usually the most important step and the biggest roadblock for companies. Every certified company must have at least one qualified welding supervisor. Some larger organizations may need more, but for most companies, one is enough. Now, here's what this person needs. 5 years of welding-related experience. There are ways to reduce that requirement under CSAW 47.1, and we can help guide you through those options. The written exam. The welding supervisor will need to complete 5 written exams and 1 verbal exam with your local CSR. This role is critical because the welding supervisor becomes the central figure in ensuring your company meets all certification requirements. So, getting this step right makes the rest of the process much smoother. On the next couple of slides, you'll see the exams of your welding supervisor that needs to be completed, depending on the certification your company is going for. A few important things to know up front. The standard exams are open books. You must have the latest edition of the standard. Time management is crucial. Most exam failures happen simply because candidates run out of time. Question can be a little tricky, so make sure you slow down, read carefully, and fully understand what's being asked before you choose an answer. And for the open book portions, remember that your standard is the only document that you're allowed to use. For companies certifying for steel standard, the supervisor will need to complete 5 exams, one for W47.1, W59, welding symbols, weld fault, and quality control and inspection. We'll walk you through each of these as we go, so don't worry, we'll make sure you know exactly what to expect. All of these exams on the slides are 90 minutes long, except for the W55.3 exam, which is 30 minutes, and all of them are multiple choice. Next, we have the 3 shorter exams. For these ones, no resources are allowed. They are completely closed book. The success rate is usually much higher on these exams, mostly because they are more straightforward and shorter than the standards exam. And finally, after completing all the written exam, you'll have the verbal exam with your certification service representative. Now, step 3 focuses on qualifying your welding engineer. And what you need here depends on the division you're applying for. Here's how it breaks down. The Division 1 requires a full-time welding engineer. The Division 2, which is where most companies fall, allows for a part-time or contracted engineer. And Division 3 does not require a welding engineer at all. If your company needs one, the engineer will have to submit Form 159 to the CWB. That's what officially links them to your organization. They also need to be listed on the Form 151, the personnel list we talked about earlier. And just so you know, the CWB has a division called CWB Consultation that can provide contracted welding engineer services for Division 2 company. If that's something you're interested in, feel free to reach out to me directly. I'll be happy to walk you through what's available. When we talk about CSAW 47.1, 47.2, and 55.3, one of the key things to understand is how the divisions work, because they determine the level of welding engineering support your company needs. Division 1 is the highest level. In this division, your company must have a full-time welding engineer on staff. This is typically chosen by larger organizations or by company doing complex or high-volume welding, where ongoing technical oversight is essential. If your welding activities require constant engineering involvement, Division 1 is usually the right fit. Division 2 is where most companies fall. You still need access to a welding engineer, but they don't need to be full-time. They can be part-time, contracted, or retained through an outside provider, like CWB consultation, for example. This division gives company more flexibility. You meet the engineering requirement, but without having to employ someone full-time. It works well for small and medium shops or companies with regular welding operation. Division 3 is the simplest level. In this division, no welding engineer is required at all. This is generally used by organizations that perform straightforward, low volume, or limited welding where engineering oversight isn't necessary. So in short, Division 1 requires a full-time engineer, Division 2 requires a part-time or contracted engineer, and Division 3 requires none. Understanding where your company fits helps make sure you're meeting the right requirement from the start. Here are a few examples to help clarify how the required division can change depending on the type of work your company performs. For example, under the CSA S16, which is the Steel Structure Design Code, all three divisions, Division 1, 2, and 3, are permitted to work on this type of project. The only difference is for Division 3 companies. You can weld, but the work must be given to you by a Division 1 or a Division 2 company. In other words, you cannot contract the work directly. You participate through a higher division certified company. Other codes may have different requirements, so it's always important to check which one applies to your project. It's also worth noting that clients can impose their own requirement. Even if the code doesn't require Division 2 certification, if your client insists on hiring a Division 2 company, then that requirement becomes mandatory for you to work with them. And just as a reminder, if your business changes or if new opportunities comes up, you can request a change in division at any time, completely free of charge. All right. One of the things to keep in mind is that the cost of certification is the same no matter which division you choose. So whether you're Division 1, 2, or 3, the certification fee doesn't change. If you're looking for a welding engineer, you can find a complete list of CWB approved welding engineers on our website. Just go to the directory section and select Approved Welding Engineers. You can search by country, by province, which makes it easy to find someone local. And across Canada, CWB Consultation also provides retained welding engineer services, along with the development of welding procedures. This is our specialty. Our engineers work specifically in this field every day, and they're very familiar with all the requirements from certification. And as I mentioned earlier, most companies end up choosing Division 2 because it offers more flexibility than Division 3. It gives you access to an engineer without requiring a full-time position, and it opens the door to more type of work and more clients' requirements. Great, let's move to step 4, which is all about welding procedures. If your company has a full-time welding engineer or a contracted welding engineer, so Division 1 or Division 2, that person is the one who will write and submit your welding procedures. For Division 3 companies, the welding supervisor is responsible for submitting the procedures. However, in practice, most supervisors will still work with a welding engineer to prepare the document, because procedure development can become quite technical. And remember, CWB Consultation can also prepare welding procedures for you. This is one of our core specialties. Our engineers write procedures every day, and they're highly experienced with the requirement of the standards. When we talk about welding procedures, we're actually referring to two different documents. The WPS, which is the Welding Procedure Specification. This document explains how to use the process, basically the general instruction for welding. And the WPDS, the Welding Procedure Datasheet. This one contains the specific technical detail, such as electrode diameter, amperage, voltage, wire feed speed, shielding gas, and much more. For mild steel, most of the joints you use will likely be covered by pre-approved procedures. But in some situations, testing may be required before CWB can officially approve the procedure. So step 4 is all about making sure your procedures are properly prepared, technically accurate, and approved by CWB so your welders can work under the correct conditions. A WPS, or Welding Procedure Specification, is a document that tells your welder exactly how the process must be used. It outlines the general welding instruction, things like which welding process to use, the position of the weld, type of material, preheat, post-heat treatment, and general technique and guidelines. The WPS doesn't go into every tiny technical detail. That information is found in the procedure data sheet, the WPDS we talked about earlier. Instead, the WPS provides the overall framework. It tells the welder, here is the process, here are the conditions, and here's how to apply the weld correctly. In short, the WPS ensures that every welder performs the weld the same way, consistently and safely, no matter who is doing the job. A WPDS, or Welding Procedure Datasheet, is the technical companion to the WPS. If the WPS is the general how-to, then the WPDS is the detailed blueprint. The WPDS contains all the specific welding variables and parameters that the welder must follow to produce a code-compliant weld. This includes amperage, voltage, wire feed speed, wire diameter, travel speed, welding position, and much more. So while the WPS gives the big picture, the WPDS gives the exact numbers and setting needed to make sure every weld is done consistently, safely, and within the limit of the approved procedure. Here are some examples of WPS and WPDS. Right. As I mentioned earlier, many of the common joints you use, especially for mild steel, are already pre-qualified under the standard. That means you still need to submit the welding procedure, but you do not need to perform any testing for those joints. The approval is automatic as long as the procedure follows the rule of the pre-qualified section. However, it's important to know that there are no pre-qualified procedures for aluminum or for rebar. In those cases, almost every procedure will require testing before it can be approved by CWB. So anytime you're working with aluminum or rebar, you should expect testing as part of the qualification process. Now, just a bit of general information about the code requirement regarding welding procedures. One of the most important rules is that your procedures must be easily accessible to the workers, both in the shop and out in the field. Welders need to be able to refer to the WPS and WPDS at any time. So the documents have to be available right where the work is happening. Most companies handle this by keeping a binder in the shop and another in each company truck for field crews. Some companies also use digital versions, but the key point is that the procedures must be available and accessible at all times. And just as an important reminder, all welding procedures must be submitted to the CWB and approved before they can be used. Even if they're pre-qualified, Even if no testing is required, they still need to be officially reviewed and approved by CWB. All right, step 5 is the final step before your certification audit. Welder qualifications are valid for 2 years, but they are only considered valid when they are attached to a certified company. So even if a welder has current qualification, it cannot be used unless it is linked to an active CWB certified organization. On average, companies obtain their certification in about 6 months. Some move faster, and others takes a bit longer, depending on how quickly the documentation steps are completed. Because of that timeline, you definitely don't want to lose months on a qualification you've already paid for. This is why we qualify welder last. To avoid delays and make sure you always contact your CSR at least 2 weeks in advance whenever possible to schedule welder testing. That gives us enough time to organize everything properly and make sure the qualification lines up with your certification process. And finally, we arrive at step 6, the certification audit. By the time you reach this stage, your CSR will already have completed 1 or 2 pre-audits with you. These pre-audits are meant to help you get ready, identify gaps, and make sure you understand what needs to be in place. Once you feel confident and everything is prepared, your CSR will conduct the official certification audit. The goal of this audit is simply to confirm that your company meets all the requirements of the code and is ready to be certified. If everything is in order, this is the step that leads directly to your certification. During the certification audit, you'll go through all of these points in detail with your CSR. Together, you'll review everything that needs to be in place to meet the code requirement. This includes confirming that you have the right qualified personnel, such as your welding supervisor, verifying that all your procedures are approved, ensuring that your equipment is in proper working condition, and confirming that your team is actually following those procedures on the floor shop and in the field. You'll also review how your company handles record keeping, making sure documents are maintained and stored according to the requirements. And finally, you'll go over the proper use of the certification mark. Once you're certified, that mark will appear in your My CWB portal on our website. We'll explain exactly when and how you're allowed to use it. And just to clarify, what I'm about to mention applies specifically to CSAW 47.2, the aluminum standard. Under W47.2, companies are required to create an operational control document for every project. You can think of this document as a project-specific checklist. Its purpose is to make sure that everything you're doing in the shop and in the field complies with the code requirement and with your approved welding procedures. It guides you through the key points you need to verify before and during production. Things like materials, joint details, equipment, procedures, and any special consideration for aluminum welding. Essentially, it helps you stay organized and ensure consistency from one project to the next. And for companies working under CSAW 55.3, which cover resistance welding, there are a few additional requirements you need to have in place. Under this standard, you must maintain a quality system that includes an organizational structure, documented procedures, work instruction, and inspection and test plan. These elements ensure consistency, traceability, and compliance throughout all the resistance welding operation. All right, then that brings us to the end of our session. I hope this walkthrough helped clarify the full certification process and what you can expect at each step. Remember, you're not going through this alone. Your CSR is there to guide you, answer questions, and support you from the very first form all the way to your final audit. If you ever feel unsure about a requirement, a procedure, or what comes next, please reach out. We're here to make the process as smooth and straightforward as possible. Thank you for joining us today. We truly appreciate your time, interest in certification, and commitment to welding quality. If you have any question, now is the perfect time.
Awesome. That's great, Remy. Thanks for providing this overview of the certification process. I do have already a few questions that came in with the registration of some of the folks that joined us today. So the first question pertains to the difference between steel welding, so CSA 471 versus aluminum welding. So basically the question says, how does the certification process differ for steel welding versus aluminum welding?
Yeah, great question. The process in itself doesn't change, so the 6 steps still applies. But like I said in the aluminum slide, the only thing that differs, not the only thing, but the biggest thing that differs between the aluminum and steel welding is the operation list. So right, let's go back one slide or two. Yeah, this, the operation control procedures. So this is one of the big difference between the steel and the aluminum standard, but the rest of the step still remains the same.
Great. Another question, switching welding supervisors, how to and which forms need to be filled out, and what's the process of getting a new supervisor approved? So mostly about welding supervisors, from qualifying a new one to when you're switching between 2 individuals for the role of welding supervisors. So they're asking what the steps that needs to be taken here.
Yeah, another great question. You need to submit like you do it when you open your certification. So if your welding supervisor leave, you have to nominate a new one. So you need to complete the form 151 again to nominate your welding supervisor, and then complete a 155 form, so to ensure that is 5 years of experience. Once that's done, it's the same process. The welding supervisor needs to go through the 5 exams. Once the exams are completed and succeed, then you will book sometimes with your local CSR for the verbal exam, and it's your local CSR that will approve the welding supervisor afterward.
Great, thanks, Remy. So these are the 2 questions that came with the registration forms. So I'm just addressing the attendees. If you have any further questions, feel free to unmute your mic, and you can have the floor and ask your questions. Otherwise, if you're not in a position to use your microphone, you can use the chat feature and submit your question. So I'll leave the floor open for a couple of minutes, and if we don't have any further questions, we will wrap it up, and we'll be sending you the slides and the recording along with all the forms that Remy covered today. I think Remy, you did such a good job that no questions
no question
are coming
needed
from the audience. Yes. Okay, 30 seconds. Okay, we have a question, I believe.
Yes,
Yep.
I came in a little bit, I was a little bit distracted right off the bat, but perhaps I missed it where the initial form to be filled out. Like I'm just in the process of adding another company to our multi-plant, and I started off with the 150 form. Is that? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah, the 150 form is the first form that you need to complete. That's your application to certification, and then you go through all the other ones. So 151, 155, and then 159.
Gotcha. No, sounds good. Thanks.
Awesome.
Adam, you have the floor. You can unmute yourself and you can ask your question.
Yes. Hi. So our company has been certified for quite a few years, and the reason I joined is to kind of just make sure that understand the principles of how it is, after people have changed positions, so on and so forth. One of the main things I kind of want to ask you guys is recently our inspector has asked us to supply drawings that have been certified. That wasn't a requirement in the past. I just wanted to see if anything has changed or just the perception of that may be different.
The requirement for technical drawing in the standard specify that the welder needs to have accurate description of what he's welding. So there's no interpretation needed. Usually we use welding symbols, and
Yep.
when you weld something structural, you need something to make sure that the compliance to the code, so in that case S16, is respected. So usually the inspector, the CSR, will ask that the drawing are stamped by a structural engineer or something like that. It hasn't changed in the past, but that might be something that your local CSR asks to see.
Okay. So when we have our entire assembly certified by an engineer, that should technically be enough then, or do we need every part stamped as well?
I'm not. I can't get into the specifics because I don't know
Okay.
your. But usually, if the bigger, so the drawing is stamped by an engineer, for structural engineer, then you can usually draw the parts for all the different parts for your welders according to this plan, and that should be okay. But then again, I'm not into the specifics because I don't know your company specifically.
All right, that answers. That's good. Thanks.
Awesome. Thank you.
I don't see any other questions on the chat. Last chance if you want to unmute and ask your question. I'll leave another 10 seconds.
And if you think, yeah, go ahead.
I have a question that pertains more so to personnel certification. I would like to become a registered certified welding engineer with the CWB, but unfortunately I didn't meet the requirements prior to 2008, so I can't apply through the transitional arrangements. I had to go the standard route. And when I emailed last year, I was told that unfortunately there are no authorized training programs available in Canada right now, so there is an opportunity to get like an IWE diploma yet, but that there were some things in the works that might become available soon. Do you know if there's been any update on that?
I'm not too familiar with the process of qualifying welding engineer. Maybe Mo can be of help here.
Yeah, no, thanks, Tiffany, for the question. Just to make sure, so you're referring to the IIW qualification, not to the CWB welding engineer. Is that correct?
Maybe my understanding, I thought you had to be an IWE engineer to become registered with the CWB. Is there another way?
It's not a requirement. You just need one of the requirements to become a CWB welding engineer is to have the PEng qualification in the province that you're planning on exercing your duties as a welding engineer. So PEng is the requirement. It doesn't have to be an IWE, an international welding engineer qualification. Usually, folks their qualification to become a welding engineer with CWB, then they apply to become an IWE. So that's how it works. We do have a page with the requirements on our website, so we can include that and send it over to you, just so you can see the requirements. But just to summarize it for today's webinar, you need to have your PEng, and you need to sit for a few exams that you'll need to pass, and then your application goes through a review process to make sure that you meet all the requirements.
Okay, yeah, I would appreciate some more information on that. I wasn't able to find anything on the website.
Yeah, we'll include that for sure.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Taking a last look at the chat, and I don't see anyone unmuting. So again, thanks everyone for joining us today. We'll be trying to have at least one webinar a month. So if you have any suggestions for future subjects, either to cover processes like the one that we covered today to certify companies, or even technical, feel free to submit your suggestions, and then if we have enough interest in one subject, we will make sure to have a session that geared toward that subject specifically. Remy, thanks for sharing the slides and for putting together the presentation. Much appreciated. Yeah, I'll let you take the last word. Awesome. And then we can call it.
Yeah, don't hesitate to reach out to me directly if you have any more question on certification or any topic that we talked about today. My email address is right on the slides, on the slide right now. I'd be more than happy to guide you through the certification process or help you through any other issue you have, either with certification or welding procedures or anything we talked about today. And with that, I hope you have a great evening, and we'll see you next month for the next webinar.